1942, I graduated out of high school, and I went into the Navy, and eventually became a Navy pilot.
Oh, you did?
Mm-hmm.
What'd you fly?
TBMs, a torpedo bomber, and I made 14 landings on a carrier down in the Bermuda Triangle, before it was the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah. The TBM was the General Motors version, right? So
There was two, TBF,
TBF, there you
and that was Grumman,
go. Right.
and then General Motors took over, and they made it a TBM, I think, or Martin.
TBF was the Avenger, right?
Yeah, and that was Grumman. I think that was Grumman.
You're right. That is. I was just reading about that.
Uh-huh.
So, well, where were you when World War II started? December 7th, 1941. Where were you?
I was working with my dad in the yard.
Okay.
When that started.
In California.
In San Fernando.
San Fernando.
Yeah. And
how did you hear about it?
well, somebody come out and says the Japanese have bombed Pearl Harbor.
Right. So what did you do?
Well, I didn't do a lot. I was still pretty young. In '38, I was, I was born in '23.
Like a junior in high school, I guess,
Yeah,
or sophomore?
coming up, yeah.
How did you decide to join the Navy?
I was walking down by the post office, and it said, college graduates, you can become a Navy pilot, providing you can pass a 2-year college equivalency test.
Right.
And I looked at that thing, and I was whatever I was, and I turned around and took the test, and I passed it. So then they said, well, okay, you passed this one. They sent me to Arizona because they had some kind of contracts with independent airports and pilots out there. And I was playing soccer, and I ran into a guy that was tougher than I was. And when I got up, this arm here was out here.
That's not good.
Not good. Kept me out of everything from then except the program. I had the best grades in that class. And I thought, well, they're going to toss me right out of here. And so I went in, and I said, well, I'm probably going to get tossed out. No, they said, no. They said, you have the best flying grade in the class, and you're second in the class in navigation, and you can still punch the gas on and off.
Right. So, were you in a pilot training program at that time?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
All right. And where was that?
That was in Wickersham Airport out in Stafford, Arizona.
I thought just the Air Force trained there, or the Army Air Corps. I mean, you're telling me that the Navy trained in Arizona?
They were just a flying school.
There were civilian pilots. There were civilian instructor pilots.
Yeah, it was
civilians.
They were pilots that were instructors.
Right.
That were under contract.
Right. Okay. So then, where did you go to train in the Navy airplanes?
I went to St. Mary's pre-flight,
Okay.
and I went to Livermore. You know Livermore?
Yeah. So you must have flown the Stearman and the SNJ, right?
I was what they call an aviation cadet.
Right.
And I got private's pay, and for flying, I got 50% more.
Right.
So I had my income was about $72 a month.
Okay. So where did you train in the TBM?
TBMs.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Opelika.
Okay.
You heard of that?
Right.
I think that's where I first got in TBMs. And I went down there and went out and looked at this airplane, and because it sits high. And I said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to fly that thing or not, you know.
Well, so the airplane you flew right before that
Yeah.
was probably the SNJ, the Texan. Right?
Yeah, it was. I flew them.
Okay, so that was a good airplane. Now you go to the TBM, and it's a huge airplane.
Yeah, it was.
It's 15 feet to the
It
top.
was.
Yeah, it was a great big thing. Carried 3 people.
Yeah.
Had a pilot, a radio operator,
It did.
and a rear gunner.
It did.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, so were you assigned to a carrier? Where did you fly it? Out of?
In Florida,
In Florida.
out over the Everglades.
Okay, but so
Yeah.
you never made it to combat then?
I never did go to overseas.
Okay.
I
It was it had a pretty high speed. You could get it up to 245 knots or so, right?
had a TBD.
A TBD, I think you're right. Yeah. And the TBF replaced it. The
Douglas.
the TBD. All right, let's a little history here. Okay, the TBD was called the Devastator, is what it was called.
Yeah.
Okay, and it was a torpedo bomber.
It was.
And the idea of a torpedo bomber is you get down low next to the surface,
was.
and you fly along, and
Yes.
within 1,000 or 2,000 yards, you drop your torpedo, and it's going to
Yeah.
hit the ship. That's the idea.
Yeah.
Okay, now, I think there's a movie coming out pretty soon about a group called Torpedo 8. Torpedo 8 was a squadron of Navy pilots where when they attacked the Japanese off of Midway Island,
It was.
they sank 4 aircraft carriers of the Japanese. This pretty much, the war went all downhill for the Japanese after that.
Yeah, it did.
Okay, but at the same time, there were TBFs in Torpedo 8, but they were on Midway Island.
Yeah.
And they launched off of Midway Island. They all got shot up really badly. One made it back. Okay. How do I know all this? Because I just got through reading about it. That top piece of paper right there tells the whole
What
story.
was his name?
Hold on a second, I'll tell you.
Let's see if I ever met him. I don't know that I ever met him.
Well, they were all brand new pilots. They had no combat experience.
Yeah.
Let's see. Harry Ferrier was one, and then there was George Gay, who was in the TBD.
That guy, that name comes up.
Okay, George Gay was the sole survivor of the TBD squad.
That's why it comes up for me.
And then the other guys were, let's see. Okay, there was well, you wouldn't know this guy. Ensign Albert Ernst was a 25-year-old flying the TBFs. And there were quite a few, almost all these guys got shot down.
Oh, yeah, they did.
It had a 54-foot wingspan.
Yes.
It was 15 feet high. It had a Wright Cyclone 2600R, 1,900 horsepower. Could carry a 2,000-pound
Torpedo.
torpedo.
Yeah.
And it was the detachment was led by Lieutenant Fieberling.
It had it had a bomb bay.
Bombay, right.
You know what I mean? It was the first one that actually had that. The rest were carried kind of outside
Right.
until then.
Oh, when you were going to drop from a TBM, how fast were you going?
Well, there was a formula. Because if you came in too high, your torpedo would do this.
Oh.
The formula was you took say you were coming in at 300. Well, in order to make that torpedo hit about right and stay in the water without bobbling up and down, you would take your speed and multiply it by 1.5, and that should be your altitude. See, if you're going when you dropped it, and that would put the torpedo hitting the water at the right angle. And it was
So, but you didn't go 300. It wouldn't go 300 miles an hour, would it?
no, you were flying along at about 240, 250.
Okay, so 240, 250, so in other words, you would be dropping at 320 feet.
That's about it.
Okay. And now?
Then your torpedo, when it hit the water, wouldn't come out and do this.
Right.
It would kind of stay in and stabilize.
What were the targets that you were shooting at?
Well, you know, we practiced. If you had 2 or 3 torpedo bombers in the neighborhood, and if you came in on a cruiser, Japanese cruiser or whatever, they couldn't get away from you. There's no ways that they could get away from you if you had 2 or 3 airplanes, because you would set yours out here and the other guy would on the other side.
Oh, really?
And either way they turned, they were going to get hit.
Okay.
And that was what we practiced.
Did you ever drop any live torpedoes?
Did I what?
Did you ever drop any live torpedoes that hit anything? I mean, ones that...
No, I don't think I ever did.
Really? Because I know early in the war, the darn torpedoes wouldn't go off when they hit things.
Yeah.
They were the Mark 11 or something like that, and they would hit they'd hear a big clank, but nothing would happen.
They had to be set.
Right.
You know, I had a gunner and I had a radio man, and they had to make that torpedo on. They had to turn it on. You know, there was a way to activate it.
So you never actually dropped a live torpedo then?
I don't remember.
Yeah. I was kind of wondering, because after you dropped the torpedo, what were you supposed to do? Here's the ship.
Well,
you're coming like this.
You're supposed to drop your nose.
Right.
And stay fairly low.
Right.
And try to get away, because your ships are coming this way.
Right.
And you come in and you're dropping your torpedo a little bit ahead of him.
Right.
And you just come in and you drop your torpedo and you drop off and you try to get away.
So when the ship is moving, you're just kind of using kind of conductive windage a little bit and saying, well, he's here and he's going that fast, I'm going to aim over there.
Yeah. And if you had a coordinated attack at all,
right,
they couldn't really get away from you because they can't turn fast enough.
Well,
and if they turn this way and you have another airplane coming in from the other side, well, he's got it. Now, if they turn your way, you got him.
So whenever you must have done some practice.
Oh, we practiced, yeah.
You practiced, and then you had a stationary target. You had a target of some sort.
They would, yeah. And they would set those things below. Set them so they go below your target. And you would have a destroyer. Destroyers aren't deep.
Oh.
And consequently, your torpedo would go under it.
Oh, I see. And it wasn't armed anyway.
No.
Well, then you must have dropped them to know that.
What?
You must have dropped a few of them just to know what they were going to do. What carrier were you on?
I was on the Solomon, number 67.
Okay. Was that one of the small carriers?
It was.
Okay. And you say you made 12 carrier landings?
400 feet.
Wow.
That's all.
Well, did it launch with a catapult?
I was never on a catapult that I recall, but they did have a catapult on some, and but I always took off. You'd rev it up and
they head into the wind.
They put you in. They had to have 25 knots over the deck.
Right.
That's what they wanted.
Right.
So that the signal man and everybody could work their job,
Right.
And so they would put the airplane into the wind.
Right.
Or the carrier into the wind, and then they would work it so you had about 25 knots over that thing, and then the signal man could do what he did, up, you're down, speed it up and stuff.
Did the airplane have a tendency to kind of go off the end of the deck and sink down to the water a little bit?
It would. They would.
That probably got your attention, didn't it?
Well, the air is being pushed up a little bit in the front, and,
Oh, right.
and then when it drops off, then you drop off a little bit.
Did you guys have water injection? in the
No,
engines?
we didn't.
No.
And who used the water injection? I forget who did, but somebody did.
A lot of them. A lot of them.
Maybe it was on the fighters.
Corsairs and
Corsairs.
Oh yeah. Oh, it just gives you 25% more horsepower.
Yeah.
Just instantaneously. It's a lot of power.
Yeah. It'd have been nice to fly a Corsair. I think they would have been a good airplane.
Yeah. So now you were in at the end of the war.
Yeah.
Where were you when the war ended?
I was in Ventura, California, and I was stationed at Oxnard. That's where they had us. They had a squadron of us at Oxnard Airport.
Okay.
And
So how did you find out the war ended? All right. Well, how did you find out about the atomic bomb?
I'm trying to think. I don't recall, except that I knew they had one.
Yeah.
I had mentioned that to somebody. I think it was my dad.
Which squadron were you in? Do you remember the squadron number?
No. Air Group 98, I think, was the thing. It was always off Florida. You know, out around the so-called Bermuda Triangle thing.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
Well, so why were you on the West Coast?
Well, they took us and they sent us to Oxnard,
Right.
and that was a pilot pool. And
Oh.
they had a pilot pool there. And
So they needed a TBM pilot.
and so we had at Santa Barbara they had fighter planes. At Oxnard they had the torpedo bombers.
But so you must have got there just before the war ended.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when were you discharged? When did you get out?
Well, it was kind of strange because I went out right after the war. As far as flying goes, they took us down to Brownfield. You know where Brownfield
Yeah.
is?
Oh, yeah.
That was the last place I flew in the Navy, and after that they
When'd you fly there?
TBMs. I think it was TBMs they had there.
Navy was like late 1945. Then what'd you do then?
Well, I went to working. I went to work. I went back to I think Holly Bolus, working at Holly's.
Where was he then?
And I just built ribs. We had we were putting out a glider kit. Remember the baby albatross?
Yeah.
And they put out the baby albatross glider kit,
Right.
and it was $385
Yeah,
or
something like that. Cheap, yeah.
Well, I was making ribs.
Okay. So you went from being a Navy pilot, then back to work to what you were doing just before you went into the Navy.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, the Bolus Company, though, I thought it ceased to exist. I thought another company bought them.
Nelson, the name Ted Nelson strikes me as being somebody that came in, and they wanted to make a powered glider. Did you ever see that?
No. Unless, I just saw it. We have a powered glider hanging from the ceiling. I just noticed it today. I've never seen it before. But it's a model.
What kind?
It was just a model, so I don't know what it was.
Well, they had that. They put the engine in the back,
Right.
underneath, and that was a Bolus baby albatross with a tricycle gear and a little Nelson engine. A guy by the name of Ted Nelson, I think it was, built those engines, and we had a problem with those engines. They overheated, and they would freeze up.
That's not good.
And well, that was, so they had to loosen up the engine quite a bit, because it's air cooled.
Right.
So they made it sloppier, and they were able to get more hours out of the
Right.
engines.
So did you ever fly one of those?
I never did, but I flew in them. I mean, I rode in them once or twice.
But so you never actually flew a glider by yourself?
Never did.
No, isn't that funny? I mean, here you were a qualified Navy pilot. You think you
Yeah.
could fly that, you could certainly fly a glider.
Yeah. Don Mitchell, remember that name?
Nope.
Well, he was a guy that was always he wanted to build a flying wing.
Right.
And so he had built one, and he had asked me. He knew that I was a pilot, qualified Navy pilot. I had commercial and everything else that went with it. So he contacted me, or I contacted him, I forget which, and he was out, I think at Hammett or somewhere. And he built this glider that he wanted me to fly. And he knew I could fly because I'd been a Navy pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I told him, sure, let me know, I'll come out and fly it. Well, Don had a heart attack and died at a fairly young age. I don't know why. And Ruth Bolus, you know the name Ruth Bolus? It was Holly's wife at that time. I said, I called her up. I said, Don was supposed to call me up because he had this airplane to fly out at Hammett. Never heard from him. And he said, oh, well, Don had a heart attack and passed away. And he was a young guy. I mean, he was about 50, So, but
So you didn't continue in an aviation career after the Navy. You didn't fly anymore.
I went to college.
Went to college. What you got a degree in something?
Yeah.
What?
I have a degree in agricultural things.
Oh, I see.
I went to Davis, you know Davis?
Yeah.
I went to Davis.
Oh, that's right. She said you had a Christmas tree farm.
Yeah.
We had all sorts of stuff in Valley Center.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, I went to Davis and I went to Berkeley.
Oh, wow.
I took courses in those places.
Okay, so your last relationship with Bolus was shortly after the war for some short period of time, I guess.
Yeah, well, Holly Bolus never had much money.
Right.
He was the guy who just didn't have money. He said money was made to spend, and he was always kind of behind.
Yeah.
And and so he ended up working for Howard Hughes.
Yeah, you said that. But he died young, I know that.
Did he die young?
Yeah, he died pretty young.
Well, I was the guy who told him
To go to work for Howard Hughes because of mold design.
because they were running some ads.
Yeah.
And I always read the ads, because I was working for Radio Plane. Remember Radio Plane?
No. What was that?
They're still active.
What is it?
They're a company that built. When I was there, we built a little flying wing, and it was radio directed. They were using them for target practice in the artillery.
Really?
And it had a little Kekoffer. Remember that Kekoffer company that put out outboard motors?
Right.
Yeah, and it used a Kekoffer.
Yeah, the Kekoffer. Yeah, I forgot about that. That's from a long time ago.
Yeah. I'm having problems with that too. And anyhow.
Well, tell me, I want to know some more about that TBM airplane.
Yeah.
How much different did it feel than flying a T6 or an SNJ?
SNJ?
Yeah.
SNJ.
But it must have been a completely different feeling.
SNJ, you had to keep up with it. TBM was easier to fly.
Really? Because it's so much bigger and slower?
Well, it was just because it was bigger. And
big engine too.
Yeah, big 54-foot, I think.
Yeah.
And it had a big wing on it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't nearly as responsive as a J.
How high could you fly it? How high did you get it?
Well, I'd been up to 30,000.
Really?
Yeah, had to put the thing on.
Yeah.
I went over to Miami one day And one of the things I had to do was wear oxygen. And I'm sitting up there
Oh, I bet.
freezing to death.
I'll bet.
And I'm looking at Miami and I'm thinking, you know, it's 95 down there, but it's minus 80 up here or whatever it was.
Did you have any sort of a gun sight?
The what?
Did you have a gun sight in it? Because it had guns, right? It had.
There were, on the TBM, we had a turret on top, you know,
Right.
actually 50 calibers.
Right.
And we had I think a 30 caliber gun down below, a little turret stick
Right.
out, so that the Japanese couldn't come in under us.
Right.
And that
But
kept,
didn't the pilot have two guns up front?
I think we did.
Yeah, I think he had two 30 calibers up
Yeah,
there.
I never fired them. I don't ever recall firing them except once down there in southern, at Opelika, Florida. I think I fired them once.
In a dive or something like
Yeah,
that?
we do. Yeah, exactly. And I was.
Did you hit the alligators?
I tried to, you know, I'll tell you, there was a cutout where you swing across,
Right.
and on the turret, and so that you couldn't cut your own tail off. That thing would cut off, you know, and then
Right.
it'd come on again. Well, but on the forward guns, which I never did use, I don't think, but I think I did. One day we went out and practiced, and it was trying to come down and try to hit something,
Right.
and I wasn't very good at that.
Yeah. Well, was there a gun sight?
Yeah,
What they used for what was the gun sight?
it was just a visual gun sight thing.
Like a ring or something?
Yeah, and we never did that. I never did it enough to be good at it.
Now, as far as the torpedo release, was that when you were going to release your torpedo at a
Yeah.
target?
Yeah,
How did you know when to release it? Now you're flying along at 320 feet.
yes.
How do you know when you're going to release it?
Well, you have your radio man, and he activates your torpedo,
Sure.
sets it up, and you would come down. You'd come down, and you would come down like that, and you'd level it out. You didn't, because you want your speed, and you want that torpedo to come out
Right.
and hit the water and stay underneath. You didn't want it to do this.
Sure.
So you would, that was what you did. You worked your speeds, and if you're at 300 feet altitude, you would want to drop it at 400 plus feet. But we weren't that low. We weren't that high. We were always pretty close to the water.
Okay, but how did you know how far away from the ship to shoot?
I don't know. Oh, well, for one thing, we didn't worry too much about. The ships can't maneuver.
Right.
And so if you have a guy coming in and he drops this torpedo, it's going to go straight.
Right.
And the other guy, we tried to coordinate. You would have another guy coming in from the other side, which, by the way, we only practiced once. That was it. Too dangerous. It was too dangerous to do it but one time, because the other guy is theoretically, he's aiming for the same spot that you are, but he's coming in from the other side. And that is scary. It was scary to me too, because it was like that. When you,
Sure. Right.
you know, and it says, that's it. You've done it. That's it.
Well, and I guess when they figured out when you got out to the fleet, you would have training when you got out into combat area. You'd learn more when you got there.
Sure. But you're theoretically, you're coming in you're looking at the same spot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, you're coming down at about 300 knots, you know.
So when you would fly, usually on a flight of 3 airplanes together? Or?
Yeah, we would fly 2. We flew a lot of 2, and we were just opposite the Air Force. No, the Air Force flew above, I think, if I recall. We flew below.
No, the Air Force flew below.
Yeah.
The British flew above
Yeah.
in formation,
Yeah,
and the Air Force flew below. So,
And so we flew just below.
yeah. So you would fly with like 4 airplanes, 2 in front and 2 on the wing down here somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay. And then your gunner in back, he'd be scanning the sky. Did the radio operator talk on a radio, or did he use teletype?
Oh, we could talk on ours. Oh, they had a tube, you know,
Oh,
you could talk between them.
but the radio operator, when he would use the radio, did he use a teletype, or did he?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember. We could, you know, we were trained on how to pick up, to blind fly, you know. They had a dot it type of thing. And if you want to fly a beam, you would come in and you'd intercept it and you'd work it out and go on in on a beam. So, and they had the same type of thing for a ship. They had a kind of a thing that could orient you to on a carrier or something.
So was that the radio guys?
Yeah, well, it was a signal that was sent out.
Right, no, but I mean, when you were flying towards the ship, if you went to the right, it would do one thing. If you went to the left,
Yes,
it would do another
exactly.
thing.
Yeah, you get a da-da, 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 and then the other side is da-da-dit.
Right.
And if you got the two together, it was a constant signal.
Oh, that's how it worked. Oh, wow.
So if you're right on the beam, it's just it's a hum. And if you get on one side, then you get something, and if you get on the other side, you get the other. Put the two together, you're on the beam. That's why they call it the beam. Remember the beam? Or they say you're on the beam.
You know, when I was in college, a friend of mine's dad had flown B-17s in World War II. And he explained that same thing to me about 50 years ago, and I didn't understand it. Now I understand it.
Is this the first time you understand it?
Yes.
Oh, good. I'm good. Your day isn't lost.
No, that's for sure. Well, let's see. Now, I mean, the information about bolus is interesting me, but the more interesting to me is about the TBM, because I just don't know many. I know things about fighter planes, but I didn't know much about them, and it's just a coincidence that I happen to be reading this article about the other survivors of Torpedo 8. Because, you know, Torpedo 8 was a squadron where we always thought everybody got shot down except for George Gay. How high could you fly it? How high did you get it?
Well, I'd been up to 30,000.
Really?
Yeah, had to put the thing on.
Yeah.
I went over to Miami one day, and one of the things I had to do was wear oxygen. And I was sitting up there, freezing to death.
I'll bet.
I'm looking at Miami, and I'm thinking, you know, it's 95 down there, but it's minus 80 up here, or whatever it was.
Did you have any sort of a gun sight?
The what?
Did you have a gun sight in it? Because it had guns, right? It had.
There were on the TBM. We had a turret on top. You know, actually 50 calibers.
Right.
And we had I think a 30 caliber gun down below, a little turret stick out, so that the Japanese couldn't come in under us.
Right.
And that
But didn't the pilot have 2 guns up front?
I think we did.
Yeah, I think he had 2 30 calibers up there.
I never fired them. I don't ever recall firing them except once down there in at Opelika, Florida. I think I fired them once.
In a dive or something like that?
We did. Yeah, exactly. And I was.
Did you hit the alligators?
I tried to, you know, I'll tell you, there was a cutout where you swing across, and on the turret, so that you couldn't cut your own tail off. That thing would come off, you know, and then it'd come on again. Well, but on the forward guns, which I never did use, I don't think, but I think I did. One day we went out and practiced, and it tried to come down and try to hit something.
Right.
And I wasn't very good at that.
Yeah. Well, was there a gun sight?
Yeah.
What they used for what was the gun sight?
It was just a visual gun sight thing.
Like a ring or something?
Yeah. And we never did that. I never did it enough to be good at it.
Now, as far as the torpedo release, was that when you were going to release your torpedo at a target?
Yeah.
How did you know when to release it? Now, you're flying along at 320 feet.
Yes.
How do you know when you're going to release it?
Well, you have your radio man, and he activates your torpedo.
Sure.
Sets it up, and you would come down. You'd come down, and you would come down like that, and you'd level it out. You didn't, because you want your speed, and you want that torpedo to come out
Right.
and hit the water and stay underneath. You didn't want it to do this.
Sure.
So you would. That was what you did. You worked your speeds, and if you're at 300 feet altitude, you would want to drop it at 400 plus feet. But we weren't that low. We weren't that high. We were always pretty close to the water.
Okay, but how did you know how far away from the ship to shoot?
I don't know. Oh, well, for one thing, we didn't worry too much about. The ships can't maneuver.
Right.
And so if you have a guy coming in and he drops this torpedo, it's going to go straight.
Right.
And the other guy, we tried to coordinate. You would have another guy coming in from the other side, which, by the way, we only practiced once. That was it. Too dangerous. It was too dangerous to do it but one time, because the other guy is theoretically, he's aiming for the same spot that you are, but he's coming in from the other side. And that is scary. It was scary to me too, because it was like that. When you,
Sure, right.
you know, and it says, that's it. You've done it, that's it.
Well, and I guess when they figured out when you got out to the fleet, you would have training when you got out into combat area. You'd learn more when you got there.
Sure. But theoretically, you're coming in you're looking at the same spot.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're coming down at about 300 knots.
So when you would fly, usually on a flight of 3 airplanes together? Or?
Yeah, we would fly 2. We flew a lot of 2, and we were just opposite the Air Force. Now, the Air Force flew above, I think, if I recall. We flew below.
No, the Air Force flew below.
Yeah.
The British flew above in formation,
Yeah,
and the Air Force flew below.
So. And so we flew just below.
Yeah. So you would fly with like 4 airplanes, 2 in front and 2 on the wing down here somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay. And then your gunner in back, he'd be scanning the sky. Did the radio operator talk on a radio, or did he use teletype?
Oh, we could talk on ours. Oh, they had a tube. You know.
Oh.
You could talk between.
But the radio operator, when he would use the radio, did he use a teletype, or did he?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember. We could. You know, we were trained on how to pick up, to blind fly, you know. They had a dot it type of thing, and if you want to fly a beam, you would come in and you'd intercept it and you'd work it out and go on in on a beam. So, and they had the same type of thing for a ship. They had a kind of a thing that could orient you to on a carrier or something.
So didn't explain. They never talk about the other half of the squadron was flying Avengers your airplane off of Midway.
Yeah, there was.
And so, and two of those guys survived. So there was actually other survivals.
Yeah, there were.
They call it, this article is called The Other Lone Survivors of
Yeah.
Torpedo 8. So,
Yeah.
but this would have been at least a year before you got into naval pilot training.
Yeah.
So,
That was before me.
yeah.
There was one of those pilots, I'm trying to think about the guy. He was a big hero. He either dropped a bomb right down through the middle of a carrier, or he dove it right down in through. He could have, I think he might have dove it. They didn't know for sure.
Well, the guys that hit the carriers, I think, that actually hit the carriers, all made it back. I'm not actually sure of that.
Yeah.
When things happen in a football game or
Yeah.
combat,
Yeah.
everything happens so fast. Who knows what really happened?
Yeah.
But the reason they were successful was the guys from Torpedo 8 flying the TBDs. They had separated from the dive bombers because the guys that were leading in the dive bombers had the wrong heading. They were going heading 260, and Waldron, the guy who was commanding the TBDs, said no, the heading's 240. And so they started arguing over the air.
Oh, yeah.
And so Waldron says, I know where to go. So he turns and he left the dive bombers up above. So the torpedo bombers go down low and they get to where the Japanese carriers are and they make their attack. But all the Japanese fighters were above and they shot all the torpedo bombers got shot down, 15 of them. One guy survived. Well, what happened was in the Japanese fighter planes all landed to refuel. And when they were landing on the deck to refuel, here came the dive bombers.
Yeah.
No resistance.
Well,
And they sank 3 carriers in about 3 minutes.
yeah.
Boom, boom, boom. And then they got one more the next day. And that was kind of the end of the war for the Japanese, in
Yeah.
truth.
They had a big red
That's right.
on,
Rising sun on the deck.
and it was a good target.
Good target, right? Yeah, that's right. I didn't know that. I just recently read that.
And they also had a problem. They had a wooden deck,
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
And when it would catch on fire because they were spilling fluids, they were spilling gas and this and that.
Yeah, and they were load bombs. It was a
Yeah,
mess.
if they got anything at all, they had a problem.
Yeah, that was a real mess for them. Thank God. I mean, they lost. To fill you in a little more, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, 6 months later, we found out we had broken the Japanese code.
Yeah.
We know the Japanese were coming to attack Midway Island,
Yeah.
which is 1,000 miles north of Hawaii. And the idea was they thought if they could take that island, they could control the whole Pacific. We knew they were coming, so we stuck some carriers up there and loaded up the island, and then we found them before we knew before they knew we were there. And so we launched all of our airplanes and attacked the carriers. They had 6 carriers and we sank 4 of them. And they lost 3,000 men, 700 airplanes, all their best aircrew, all their best pilots. The war was downhill from then after that, and all because we broke the Japanese code and we knew they were coming.
Halsey, he figured everything out for his pilots. And he would come in and he would set them in one direction and he would turn and he would figure out how much fuel they had and where he could meet them.